a lot of people keep asking, why don't victims name names? Why doesn't Massey name names? I'm not here to run cover for either. I think if you have the names, name them. However, not only do we have to think about, like, remember all the allegations of Epstein's secret rooms, all the potential blackmail going around, that could easily be affecting the victims too. The fact that Virginia Guffrey died of suicide, quote unquote, maybe she didn't. Maybe they do have a good reason to be skeptical of naming names, knowing just how evil our elites are. I have another potential reason. First of all, Epstein's lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, this is another guy who's implicated heavily in the files, by the way. Like, not just, like, named and, like, doing business with Epstein. Obviously, we know that already. He's his lawyer. Which, you gotta be some kind of absolute scum of the earth to defend Epstein. I guess your job, but still. God. He's also implicated in, like, he's, like, named by victims as one of the abusers. He calls the young victims liars, prostitutes, sluts, and druggies. He told them they could be charged with crimes, and now he's threatening to sue them.
Of McCarthyism that has afflicted America since the 1950s. I want you to look at this paper that has been reproduced and sent by the Justice Department. It's called Prominent Names, and it's a list of prominent people who have been accused. Every single name of every accuser has been blacked out. So, for example, let's turn to me. It says blank, 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 blacked out, stated she gave him a massage on Epstein's plane, parenthesis, not a minor. So let's understand that. This is an adult, a woman who was on Epstein's plane, she says. I was never on an Epstein plane with a young woman.
Right.
I never got a massage. This is total defamation, a total lie, but I can't disprove it because they won't give me her name. McCarthyism on the issue of his spying let me continue.
Let's get
on
to
the
that.
issue of his for the Mossad. That comes from what is called an undercover confidential source. I happen to know who the source is. The source is somebody who the FBI investigated, found to be totally incredible, lacked all credibility. This is the worst form of McCarthyism. Why are we tolerating this? Why are we allowing accusations without the names of the accusers? For example, in my case, it's an adult woman. We don't know whether she's a victim. We don't know whether she's a perpetrator. We don't know whether she's a co-conspirator. Why do you hide her name?
So do you take his word for it? This NWO account, top comment covers it very well. Well, clearly he's the victim in all this. Isn't that true? I don't like guilty until proven innocent logic. It has ruined a lot of lives. False accusations are awful, right? I think you gotta be some sick kind of person to make them, and I think it can destroy your life to get one. But at the same time, buddy, you're defending a PDF file, and you're implicated with the PDF file. Like, and where are you getting your information? We're taking his word for it that he talked to the FBI and said, they said that she's an incredible source. How are we supposed to know that? Alan Dershowitz, a prominent American attorney at Harvard Law and Harvard Law professor, published a controversial op-ed in the Los Angeles Times on May 7th, 1997, titled "Statutory Rape is an Outdated Concept." In the piece, he argued that modern statutory rape laws were outdated, illogical, and needed to be re-examined, proposing that the age of consent should be lowered to 15 or 14. If a 16-year-old can choose abortion, she should be able to choose to have. Oh my god, this is so... These people! That was another thing that Elon, I believe, was talking about, which, again, also named in the files. There's not even solid proof that he's been to the island. Actually, there's proof that he's... So far, a lot of the talk with Elon has been like, Epstein trying to talk in code and make innuendos, and Elon being too autistic to really get them. Which is gross, but kind of funny in its own way, too. And like, in these trafficking rings, right? It's not all the time that it's the guys that are recruiting girls. Sometimes they get their ring of girls, and they use those girls to enlist more girls. And if you're thinking like a pervert, it makes sense. Girls are naturally wary of men. Alright, I believe in true gender equality. I loathe the sort of man-hating culture that we have now. But I'm also a biological realist, and from a biological standpoint, women are naturally more wary of men. They're the more selective sex, right? However, with other women, even though that there is a natural sort of competition, there is a natural sort of rivalry that a lot of girls have with each other, women are naturally more inclined to trust other women because they're less of a threat to them, right? It's the same reason that people are more worried about trans men in women's bathroom than trans women in men's bathroom. To be clear, I think men are entitled to privacy. I don't want, like, men are entitled to privacy just as much as women are. But we worry more about trans women in ladies' locker rooms because men are more of a threat, biologically speaking, to women. They are stronger, they are bigger, they are more capable of overpowering us. That's not all trans women, to be clear, especially like real trans women. If I met Blair White in the women's bathroom by chance, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't even clock her if I didn't know she was trans from her content on YouTube. But you have these gross AGP looking motherfuckers going in there and showing that they are sexual perverts. They're on the prowl, and they're in your space where women are vulnerable, especially like locker rooms and stuff. Yeah, women are going to be scared. Not just uncomfortable, but scared. What I mean by that is, like, these people, these traffickers, these guys, these disgusting men that are looking to recruit girls in their god-awful schemes, it makes sense that they would use the girls that they have to enlist more girls. So the girls, sadly, in and of themselves, become part of the trafficking, part of the crime. That sort of ideology that the leftists always use as an excuse to reduce prison sentences. Dude, so many perpetrators were victims themselves at some point. There are many cases where I would say that doesn't fucking matter. Throw them in the wood chipper. But in this case specifically, it's sad because, yeah, disgusting men like this can use that against these girls to ruin their lives. People like this on the surface level can use that to destroy their credibility, ruin their lives, and it can backfire on them in the public eye in terms of court cases. That's not even considering what's going on in the underlayers, in the bed of corruption that lies under here. The blackmail, the threats, so much that can, like, not just threaten your position in public life, but your position in any sort of life. And it would be scary. Again, you can say, well, they should just name the names, get them out there, we'll jump on it. We have been twisting the arm of the government to release these files for years. Biden did not release them. Trump did not release them after saying he would. What if they name the names and nothing happens? And they don't get the protection that they need, and the perpetrators are not put in prison. Then what happens? And even from behind bars, these guys can still make orders. I get the frustration. I really do. I get the frustration. You have the names, name them. On the other hand, I also get why these girls would be scared. I get why people like Massey would be hesitant. I still believe this is information that needs to be out there, and there is so much that has the potential to go wrong for these girls from both a surface level and a conspiratorial standpoint. And speaking of Massey, by the way, he talked more about this in an interview recently. Why doesn't Massey release the names? Here's your answer.
Why haven't you released the names? You said you were going to release the names.
I got some of these questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have the names. I never had the names, never claimed to have the names. The survivors have the names. And what I did was to offer to read those names on the floor of the House if we couldn't get the government to release them. That wasn't the be-all, end-all. That's an inducement to the government to say, look, at the end of all of this, we are eventually going to get these names out, but we're going to make you release them. And so the other reason not to release, let's say we've got 20 names, is there's probably 100, right? And if we release the 20, they could release the 20 documents that name those 20 people and keep 80 documents secret. As long as there are some names that the survivors have that the DOJ hasn't released, then they got to keep doing releases.
I'm not here to tell you to glaze Massey. I'm not here to tell you to hate Massey. But from an objective standpoint, this does make sense too. Getting the government to release the names, as opposed to just the victims or just somebody reading them on the victim's behalf. If the government does it, there's an extra layer of security there, right? True, they could still go after the girls to prevent them from like going to trial, to prosecuting, pressing charges, all that. But if the government does it, A, there is an extra level of security there. B, there's a level of accountability there, considering it's the government's job. They've been told to release these files multiple times. They haven't. And C, 3, if you can only release they can only release so many names, right? There are only so many victims that have come forward. There are only so many victims that are willing to talk to Massey behind the scenes, that are willing to testify. It's a very limited number, right? In the files, there's hundreds, thousands. In the files, there's like hundreds of girls that are mentioned, that make these allegations, that voice their concerns, that all these things. There's hundreds to thousands of them. But there's off the top of your head, like maybe a dozen girls that are accusing Epstein publicly that are known, right? If the victims release the names, then that's all they get. They only get the names that this tiny amount of victims that are willing to come forward are able to name. If we can pressure the DOJ to release the whole shabaddle, we're going to get a lot more names inherently, because then you're also releasing what the victims who are too afraid to come forward, the victims who haven't come forward, and you can argue some of them incredible or whatever. You're still getting more names that way. I'd say that's worth it. I get the frustration of like, you have the names, just say them, just say it. I get it. 100%. I get it. At the same time, I get why they're skeptical. I get why they're scared.